It is my pleasure to welcome you to Birds of the Pacific Flyway, an event brought to you by Cornell West Coast Alumni Affairs and the Lab of Ornithology. In these challenging times when there's so much uncertainty in the world, we so appreciate you being with us. My name is Carolyn Sedgwick, and I am both a Cornell graduate and an employee of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where I work with the philanthropy team. It's an honor to be collaborating with Cornell's West Coast Alumni Affairs and Development team on today's event. West Coast Alumni Affairs serves the Cornell community by enhancing and building connections among alumni, parents, and friends from Seattle to San Diego. Information on other upcoming events in the area will be sent out to you in a follow-up message after this event. In addition to having many participants directly connected with the university with us today, we are also joined by dedicated supporters of the Lab of Ornithology. We are so pleased to be sharing this time with you. Before I introduce our special guests, I'd like to give a little background on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology's founding director, Dr. Arthur Allen, a Cornell alum, started the Cornell Lab over 100 years ago and was among the first professional ornithologists in the world. Rather than looking at birds through a narrow species by species lens, Doc Allen took a comprehensive approach to understanding avian ecology and engaging the public. That approach continues to this day as the lab interprets and conserves the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. The lab is a scientifically rigorous organization, publishing over 100 peer-reviewed articles each year, yet also an organization committed to inspiring people on local and global scales. The lab has tremendous reach with its education and citizen science programs, and our digital resources aid beginning and expert birdwatchers alike. Our free Merlin bird identification app, for instance, now has been downloaded 4.5 million times, with over 600,000 active users last month alone. When Doc Allen started the lab as a small one-man shop, he probably couldn't have envisioned that it would now have 250 staff with an annual budget of around $32 million. While we have a close relationship with Cornell University, the Lab of Ornithology is not a department of Cornell, and the lab is responsible for raising this annual budget. The money we raise comes from a variety of sources, including memberships, individual donations, federal research contracts, and business income from endeavors such as our Bird Academy online education courses. A very special thanks to those of you with us today who make our work to understand and conserve the natural world possible. The lab's cutting-edge science helps guide conservation efforts around the world, and we have a passion for sharing this science with others. We have a significant K-12 education program, for instance, through which we provide free curricula for teachers who are on the front lines teaching children about science. For adults, we offer online courses through our Bird Academy. We have a brand new course, in fact, The Joy of Bird Watching, which is a great place to learn more about birding in your backyard. Reaching underrepresented groups is also a priority for the lab, and we have an expansive program to bring science to Title I schools and work with teachers to provide tools that can connect students in urban areas with nature. Cornell University and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology champion interdisciplinary initiatives focused on impact and positive change. Whether you're a Lab of Ornithology member or an alumni, parent, or friend of the university, we thank you for being part of this community to change the world. I'd like to offer a few housekeeping tips for today's event. We'll have about 50 minutes of presentations, followed by around 25 minutes of questions. We encourage your questions for our panelists, and we have allocated plenty of time for those at the end of the event. Feel free to send your questions in at any time, but know that we'll hold on answering them until the end of the presentations. If other questions or ideas arise after the event, I welcome you to contact me directly. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our three panelists today. I'll invite them to turn on their videos so you can see their faces. Great. Osvel Hinojosa Huerta has been working in conservation and research projects in northwestern Mexico since 1997, particularly in wetland and coastal areas of the Sonoran Desert and the Gulf of California. Previously, he was the director of the Water and Wetlands Program for Protectora Noroeste in Mexico, where he led the efforts to restore the Colorado River Delta, including the restoration of river flows and the facilitation of binational negotiations between Mexico and the US. Currently, he is the director of Coastal Solutions Fellowship Program at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where he is working to develop capacity and cross-collaborative projects to protect threatened coastal habitats for communities and shorebirds along the Pacific Flyway from Mexico all the way to Chile. Natalia Martinez Corsi is a postdoctoral biologist and a member of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's first cohort of the Coastal Solutions Fellows Program. This commenced last year. Her project is located on Chiloé Archipelago in southern Chile, a site that provides critical wintering habitat for shorebirds. She is based at the Austral University in Chile, where she is collaborating with researchers on shorebird ecology, as well as experts on public policy and coastal zone management. Natalia is conducting research on shorebird ecology and the socioeconomic impact of aquaculture activities. Her research is resulting in the creation of an adaptive management model that identifies solutions to reduce the impact of seaweed farming on shorebirds. She is working with local communities to implement her recommendations. Last but certainly not least, Brian Sullivan came to the Cornell Lab in 2005 to put his lifelong passion for birds to work building Ebird. After seeing Ebird mature into a global bird monitoring database, he turned his attention to a new role, digital publications lead for information science, where he now guides the Birds of the World project. Brian has conducted fieldwork on birds for more than 25 years, with a special interest in diurnal raptors and geographic variation. He has authored numerous papers for both popular and scientific literature, and has co-authored several bird identification books, as well as a groundbreaking Raptor ID app for mobile devices. Brian also enjoys bird photography, sound recording, and videography. When not thinking about birds, Brian is busy trying to convince his daughter that they are cool. Brian is currently based in Monterey, California. Thank you to all of our panelists for being with us. So let's get started. What birds are in your backyard and how can we learn more about them? Brian, we'll turn it over to you to start us off.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. Let's see if I can get this set up. All right, so excited to be here today to talk a little bit about birds. We've got an interesting situation right now with COVID-19. These last several months, people have been increasingly interested in birds, and I've heard many times that birds are having a moment, so to speak. People are looking at birds in their backyards for the first time and interested in understanding what kind of birds may be around their area. So the great thing is we have answers to those questions at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We have lots of tools and services that can help people explore birds. And one of the projects that I worked on for years or so is the project you're looking at here called Ebird. Ebird can really be thought of as a suite of tools for the birding community. On the front end, it allows birders to submit bird observations from their yards or from anywhere around the world where they go birding. And it has a series of output tools that allows them to, birders to dig into this database of bird records. And just to give you an idea of the scale, Ebird has collected data from just about everywhere around the world, 850 million bird observations in the database so far, with millions and millions more coming in each month. It's a very active site that has 500,000 birders around the world contributing data. So it's a perfect place for you to jump in and explore what's being seen around you. And in reading a lot of the questions in the lead up to this event, a lot of those questions were focused around, what birds are around me and where can I go to see birds? So if you look at the top here, you'll see several major tabs where you can explore eBird's services. I'm really going to focus on this Explore tab today, and then toward the end of this presentation, get into a little bit of the science aspects of the data outputs of eBird, and turn it over then to Osfel and Natalia. So let's jump right in to eBird. So this is the home page you're looking at, and if you're a keen eBirder like I am, you'll see all of your stats here at the top of the page. Those tend to keep birders going, let them know sort of how they're progressing and investing their time in the site and in their birding. You'll get to a stats bar here at the bottom and various other media feeds at the bottom, such as the top photos in the world and the top sound sounds being sent into Ebird and the Macaulay Library. Ebird is an amazing set of tools, and I'm only going to touch briefly on it today, but there's a lot here. So let's jump into the Explore tab. So I happen to live in Carmel Valley, California. So I'm going to use Monterey County as my test case today. And you can see at the top of the Explore page, there's basically two major pathways. One is to explore information about a species, and the other is to explore information about a region. And then below that, there are various other tools that Ebird has, including maps and media galleries, all sorts of things to dig into here. But today I'm going to focus on birds in Monterey County to show you all how you might explore a local county around you. So you just type in Monterey, and it immediately pulls up this dashboard overview. We think of it as sort of an overview of all the birding activity that's happening currently, actually for all time in the county. And you can see right at the top, you've got the number of species reported in the county. Monterey happens to be a very birdy county, so it has 500 species recorded. And then this number here, 132,000 checklists. So it's important to say what a checklist is. It's pretty simple. It's basically a list of species that a birder makes when they go birding at a particular location. So this list is a species list ordered basically by the most recently observed birds in the county. And as you scroll down this sort of dashboard view, you'll see recent visits here, and you can highlight over where people were birding, the number of species they've seen. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on top eBirders, except to say that birders are a competitive bunch of people by nature. And this friendly competition that shows the top eBirders really drives people to submit a lot of data. All of these top eBirders in the county have thousands and thousands of lists submitted for Monterey, and it's part of the fun that gets people out there birding every day. I think the most interesting way to look at bird data for a county is this illustrated checklists view. Now, this, what's going on here? Let's see. Sorry. Illustrated checklist does not appear to be working. There we go. All right. So illustrated checklist, again, gives you a stats overview of the number of species, but this is focused more from an identification perspective and helps you understand the seasonality of birds in a county. So this species list is ordered taxonomically, so it starts with ducks and geese and things like that. But as you scroll down, you're getting a snapshot into the eBird database here of the frequency of occurrence of a species. So if you're interested in, say, one of these ducks, you know, you'd look at the bar chart. The green bar chart here really gives you a sense of how frequently each species is observed. And if we look at green-winged teal, for example, we can see that in the winter months, it's fairly frequently observed in the county, but then in the summer, it's quite rare. So here we are this first week of August, and you can see most of the ducks really aren't very common in Monterey County in the first week of August. But once you get down to surf scoter, something like that, you'll see that they're around. The interesting thing here too is that on this illustrated checklist view, eBird is giving you a slice of data specific for Monterey County or the county of interest, including the media feed. So the photos and the sounds are all specific to this particular county. And it's a really great way to see what the birds actually look like in the county you're interested in. You can quickly jump off using this All Media Explorer, and this will give you a sense of the photos that have been submitted of birds in this particular county. So there's a lot of really interesting ways to explore data at the county level. I'm just going to jump back and show you an example of the other question that I saw a lot leading up to this webinar was, well, where do I go find birds in my local area? And this tab up at the top called Hotspots gives you a really good sense of the birding sites in an area and how many species are seen at each of these sites. So if you scroll down here in Monterey County, you know, there are many sites that have hundreds of species on the list for those sites. And again, these are summaries of real data from real birders visiting these sites. And if you're interested in a particular site, such as Moonglow Dairy, which is one of our famous birding sites here in Monterey County, you can click on that and you should see, let's see here. I'm sorry, this is taking a long time to load today. You see a view now of Moonglow Dairy that summarizes the data at the site level, just the way we did at the county level. And you see again, this same sort of dashboard overview of activity, but now it's restricted down to the site level. And again, if you're going to visit a particular site, it's really neat to be able to dig into the data and look very specifically at, you know, what birds look like at this particular site, when certain species may occur at the site. It's a highly informative way to figure out what birds are around you and where you might go to have the best chances of seeing a particular species. So the other piece that people are interested in is looking for a particular species. So we're still looking at Moonglow Dairy here as our site, and you can see that, you know, long-billed curlew, I'm going to use long-billed curlew as an example. This is a bird that breeds in the center of the United States in the Great Plains and Great Basin, but it's quite common here in California, along the coast on sandy beaches, as well as in some grasslands of the interior, particularly the central. But if we want to know more, say you were out for a family walk on the beach and you think you saw one of these long-billed curlews, you can get to the long-billed curlew page from anywhere in Ebird by using the Explore tab and typing it in, or exploring, as I said, the site level, and you can pop over to these species pages. And these species pages are really a basic snapshot of the key identification features at the species level. So this little paragraph here is focused largely on identification. And then what's interesting is if you come in through the Moonglow Dairy channel, all of the information below the top here is specific to Moonglow Dairy. And you can see that, you know, at Moonglow Dairy, this bird's common year round. Here are some pictures of it at Moonglow Dairy, but no one submitted any sound recordings of this bird at Moonglow Dairy. And we have this basic overview for every species in the world, 10,700 species. All of this stuff is freely available for you to just jump into and dig around. If you have a desire to go deeper into understanding a species, there's a couple of options for doing that. As I scroll down, I want to touch briefly on the Merlin Bird ID app that Carolyn mentioned in her opening to this webinar. Merlin is a fantastic tool that's geared for mobile devices, so it works on both mobile platforms. And basically, it lets beginners and intermediate expert birders alike identify birds wherever they are around the world, and it's got some really great features for doing that. At its basic level, it allows you to, it asks you just a few questions, and then it uses the smarts of Ebird to take your answers to those questions, filter it through the likelihood of what birds are around you at a very local level to come up with the identifications that it gives you. It also has a photo ID component that uses computer vision to identify your bird photos. So you can upload any bird photo to Merlin and it'll tell you what a high degree of accuracy in the high 90s. So it's a really great free app from the lab. If somebody on the panel could post that link somewhere, you could just search Merlin Bird ID in any of these app stores and grab the app. It's definitely worth it. If you're interested in learning how to identify birds, Merlin definitely will get you there as quickly as possible. So getting back to, if you want to go deeper into a species account, we have this project that I run now called Birds of the World. And our Birds of the World team is basically a global team of editors, authors, and NGOs working together to build out these very, very deep natural history accounts for all the birds of the world. So the page I just showed you, the Birds of the World has up to 70 plus articles that are scholarly referenced information, that contain scholarly information about all these aspects of natural history aspects of birds. One of the things I want you to look at here is this range map. And a range map, a species range map, is historically, when you look at a field guide or any kind of depiction of a bird's range in a book, you see something that looks like this. And basically, this is again for long-billed curlew. And the pinkish color here shows where they breed, and the blue color shows essentially where they winter. But with Ebird now, we've gone a lot further than these basic polygons to show range. We're able now to model the movements and abundance of birds at scales never before possible. I'm going to show you a little bit of that by looking at move here. I'm just going to jump back over to Ebird real quick and hope that this animation plays for you all. So this is, I'm going to stay on this visual for a minute or two just to give you a sense of what this is. So all of those tools that I just showed are sort of the fun side of Ebird for birders, but really the goal of Ebird is to collect data for science and conservation. And we're really excited now to be able to model the data collected by bird watchers and create these really precise annual range maps that show the abundance across a species' whole life history. Now, what you're seeing in this visualization is, again, long-billed curlew. I'm going to pause it here when they get up to breed. So this is what real data looks like on a map. So you can see it's not really a polygon. There's a lot more precision, and the brighter colors indicate higher relative abundance of long-billed curlews. So these deep, deep pink colors mean this is the real core of long-billed curlews' breeding area. And then as you let it move to winter, you can see how they migrate mostly to the Pacific coast and west coast of Mexico. And what's interesting is that footprint of breeding was quite large across the US. And in winter, these birds really pile into relatively small stretches of habitat, including the Central Valley grasslands, as well as the coast all along the Pacific coast, the west coast of Mexico, and then southeast Texas. What's really exciting about this is that not only can we model where birds are, but we know how many there are in each of these places. And, you know, the Coastal Solutions program is really it's about tying together these very, very important places for birds that are necessary for birds to stop over in migration and really important for birds during winter. Typically, conservation doesn't really happen at that kind of precise scale. So it's really exciting to be able to arm conservationists with data that allows them to take action on sites in a much more precise way. So that's all I had for today. I'm going to turn it over now to Osvel and Natalia, and they'll tell you more about this great program they're running. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That was a great presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. And thanks everybody for being here. It's an honor participating in this panel. I'm so glad to be with all of you today. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the Coastal Solutions Fellows Program, which is a program that is at the intersection of science and conservation and education at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I'll start by talking about the importance of coastal ecosystem services. No, this is something that all of us know, and it's critical for many communities all along the Pacific, no, in the United States and Canada, but especially along Latin America. There is this estimate, no, that coastal ecosystem services are valued at about $15 trillion, and of course this has been increasing over the last decades. But of course, no, the coastal habitats are also very important for shorebirds. No, it's habitat for millions of shorebirds that use all of these places along the coast. No, and Brian was telling us about Ebird and the data. And so this is a visualization looking south. That's the Gulf of California and the coast of Mexico for Wimbrel. No, and we can see using Ebird data where the important sites are. So if we want to concentrate our conservation effort, we can see now with better precision than ever before where we need to work. You know, there's Panama and the Gulf of Fonseca, especially now when you start looking at central and southern Chile, you see the concentration of birds with those high bars. No, those indicate the higher abundance of birds in these critical places. So this has been helping us to guide the conservation efforts all along the coast. And these birds, as you can imagine, face a big number of threats during their migration. Industry, development, tourism, recreation, aquaculture, and pollution. So we need to find ways to interact effectively with these different sectors to achieve meaningful conservation results. And that's something that we have been working on, not only by ourselves at the lab, but with biologists and experts throughout the continent, but also working together with architects and civil engineers and experts on policy, you know, trying to figure out what needs to be done. One of the key challenges that was identified is that on one hand, you know, we have the scientists, biologists, conservationists trying to protect these sites and the species and biodiversity, typically working on academia or in NGOs. And then on the other side, we have the architects, civil engineers, planners, developers, typically working on the private sector. And there is a barrier. There is no communication between these two sectors. And that's the challenge now in terms of sustainable coastal planning and conservation. So one of the key strategies that was identified was trying to figure out ways to connect these two sectors and be able to use the resources and knowledge from the different disciplines, but also help to cultivate, you know, a new generation of leaders that can understand both disciplines, both languages, and be able to carry out very successful conservation projects. And that's how the Coastal Solutions Fellows Program was started in 2018 at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, really as a joint initiative between the Packard Foundation and the lab, both providing the funding for this project. And we have been very lucky that also with general support from lab donors like Elizabeth Dudley and Ross Fawcett, this has been possible. No? And by the way, Ross Fawcett is also a member of the advisory board of the Coastal Solutions Fellows Program and has helped design this, what we're doing. And this is our goal, no? To protect threatened and coastal habitats along the Pacific Flyway of Latin America for shorebirds and communities through intersectoral and multidisciplinary collaboration, but also through capacity building for early career leaders in Latin America. And we see this as a unique opportunity for early career professionals to combine scientific knowledge with advances in engineering and design for effective coastal conservation. And this is a 2-year fellowship where we provide the resources, the training, and the skill development for solutions that integrate knowledge between sectors and disciplines. And this is a picture of the lab, by the way. And one of the great benefits of having this fellowship at Cornell is that, of course, we have the great resources at the Lab of Ornithology, but we also have many other departments that provide support for the fellows. For example, in terms of natural resources from the College of Agriculture and Life Science, but also we have the Department of Landscape Architecture, and the School of Architecture and Art Planning, and as well as Civil and Environmental Engineering, and the Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability. So it's not only the lab, but many other resources and faculty that provide their expertise for the fellows. And so what are some of the characteristics of the fellows? Well, they need to be citizens of Latin America, and they can be scientists, you know, biologists, ornithologists, ecologists, conservation practitioners, but also architects and designers, planners, and engineers. So it's open for a diversity of disciplines. Or target our early career professionals, no, from the private, academic, or nonprofit sector. And the fellowship provides $80,000 during the 2 years of the program, but also different things in terms of support. No? Includes 2 international training retreats, where the fellows receive capacity building processes, no, for governance, strategic planning, communications, leadership. And then also they receive academic affiliation with Cornell. And they implement their projects. So the fellows are at their countries. No? They travel for the retreats and for training, but they are in their sites implementing their projects. But they receive support and coaching and evaluation in terms of their project implementation and their impacts. And they also form a network, no, of support for implementation. And then also they travel to train with other organizations to learn particular skills that they need to develop. And we also support online learning throughout the fellowship. And so every year we select 6 fellows, but they come with a multidisciplinary team of mentors, collaborators, and partners. So in the next 5 years, we expect to have over 150 leaders and experts from different sectors and disciplines collaborating for coastal conservation along the Pacific Flyway. And the program is supported, as I was mentioning, with an advisory board. It's an amazing group of 15 experts from different sectors, different countries, and different disciplines. So we have people from academia and conservation organizations, also from government, but also a good number that comes from the private sector, from development, from engineering, from landscape architecture. No? So they help us understand these sectors better and to try to find ways to connect the fellows and the program with the different types of organizations. Just to give you an idea, no? These are the logos of the different participants in our advisory board. And we have a call for applications every year, and we receive proposals from the different countries, and we're very excited that we have already received applications from most of the priority sites along the Pacific Flyway and from all of the 11 countries in Latin America along the Pacific coast. And right now we're in the middle of our 3rd call for applications, and it's going very well. Now the program is gaining momentum, and we're very excited that every time we receive better and better proposals. And this is our first cohort of Coastal Solution Fellows, and Natalia is one of them, and she will talk with you in a minute. And this is our 2nd cohort of fellows that started this January. And we're very excited because we have fellows from Mexico, and Guatemala, Colombia, and Chile, with a good balance of disciplines, you know, architects, engineers, biologists, and natural resource managers. And I will show a short video where, let me see, I need to stop sharing my screen. Give me a second. And in this video, you will hear directly from the fellows. There is an urgency to protect coastal places. And we need to do this in a way that has a long-term impact. These places are really important for economic and social, cultural activities, and we are losing these valuable resources.
shorebirds have suffered. Every year, millions of shorebirds migrate from their breeding grounds in the United States and Canada south to their wintering grounds in Latin America along the Pacific coast. And they need to stop at hundreds of priority sites that provide them shelter and food to survive their whole life cycle. In the last 50 years, we have lost 32% of all shorebirds in North America. If we want to save these birds, we really need to protect all of the important sites all along the flyway in all of these countries. The only way to successfully do this is to engage partners and conservation leaders at each of these sites along these countries and finding ways to balance the conservation goals with the needs of coastal communities in Latin America and involving diverse sectors, disciplines, and stakeholders. The program is not only about the conservation of birds and their habitats, but it's also about the needs of people and communities. We are cultivating early career leaders that can really find solutions for the coastal challenges.
Ten years ago, when there was a huge earthquake, more than half of the wetland dried completely. That changed the livelihood activities of the people, and they abandoned the wetland. What we really want to do is to set a nature sanctuary in the place and have this nature sanctuary co-managed by the communities. We're going to rebuild this relationship as a way to reconnect the local community to this ecosystem.
My project is located in the city of Valdivia in Chile, which is where I live, and is facing many threats like development, drainage, and filling of wetlands. When you have development activities upstream the rivers, that can cause problems in terms of water quality. It's key for the wetland functions. What I'm trying to do is implement a set of basic strategies that are nature-based solutions. Plants have this intrinsic ability to absorb pollutants, and you can use that function to filter water and release it to this wetland system.
My project is about shrimp and salt farms. We found that they are important places for shorebirds. Some of them are not helping. For example, they put plastic liner on the ponds. That makes that the shorebirds can access to the ground to feed. If my project is successful, what I would like to have as a result is a pilot farm that will show others that it is possible having conservation and biodiversity living in their farms.
One of the key elements of the program is capacity building. So we're training the fellows to become effective conservation practitioners and leaders. So the program provides training on aspects such as coastal governance, strategic planning, communication, and how to be really good collaborators with other sectors and disciplines.
We are designers, planners, we're also ornithologists, scientists, hydrologists, even anthropologists. So I would say the convergence of all these disciplines is key to success because you're able to incorporate all the values, all the different perspectives. That's why I found the Coastal Solution Program exactly what I was looking for, actually. Because Manuela is an anthropologist, I think she's more sensitive on how can this be achieved.
Con el Coastal Solution Fellows, mis expectativas es poder crecer académicamente, pero también de forma personal, encontrar relaciones con otras personas a lo largo del continente, poder intercambiar experiencias, también conocimientos, poder colaborar en el desarrollo de los proyectos y apoyarlos a alcanzar el éxito que requiere cada uno.
to have this network of people working with you, not just at the local level, because you have your mentor, your cross-sectoral collaborators, you have your host institution, but you also have your fellows, friends or colleagues. And I think I'm not doing this thing by myself.
We understand that these are bold ideas, but we also know that these are attainable goals. The fellows, they have real connections. They have connections with the community, and they have connections to these ecosystems. People are starting to pay attention, and they can do a much better job at protecting these sites than anybody else could do.
We can't just be thinking of protecting, pristine areas. We can do conservation in our backyards. We can do conservation in our farm, and we can do conservation in the wetland that is facing my house. If you scale that up throughout a country or throughout the world, you can definitely put up a mosaic, of small places that are being conserved. This is strategic conservation.
Entonces creo yo que este proceso me está sirviendo mucho porque voy a aprender cosas que están fuera de mi conocimiento, ¿no? De mi zona de confort, se podría decir.
It makes me sometimes sad that I hear friends and people and young biologists not finding the opportunity to do something for our country, to do something for biodiversity in Guatemala. Being here and being part of the Coastal Solutions Fellow Program is just the best way to show everyone that it is possible.
That's the video. Thank you very much for watching. That's all I have. And now I want to introduce Natalia Martinez. She's one of our fellows, and she embodies what we are looking for in the program, the combination of science, but implementation on the ground. So Natalia, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oswald, for your presentation. It confirms me how proud I am to be part of this program. Wait a minute while I put my video. Okay. Okay. So with my presentation, I want to share with you my experience as a fellow, and this cover photo with my colleagues represent a bit of the spirit of the program. I feel that I am not flying alone, but I am part of a flock that motivates me to think of innovative solutions to solve problems and gives me the strength to approach disciplines that were previously unknown to me. This flock is teaching me to turn challenges into opportunities. Opportunities not only to meet the conservation challenges of migratory birds and coastal environments, but also to develop my career from a much more comprehensive approach. As Oswald and Caroline already commented, I am a biologist from Southern South America, passionate about shorebirds. What fascinates me about this bird is their ability to perform amazing migrations in which they travel thousands of kilometers a year to link their breeding and non-breeding areas. And the Hudsonian godwit, which is the bird on the photo, is the model species of my project. This bird is wearing a transmitter that my host institution, the Australian University of Chile, and some collaborators put on this year. And through these devices, we knew, for example, that some birds flew more than 9,000 kilometers in 6 days of non-stop flight. And to face the challenge of this non-stop flight, the site that these birds need to feed and rest should be in optimal conditions. And that's what motivates me to work on their conservation. They are very gregarious species that depend on a limited number of highly productive wetlands located along their flyways. These sites are exceptional in terms of quality and quantity of food, so they cannot be replaced. And since shorebird depends on large geographical areas to complete their annual cycles, it is necessary to conduct coordinated efforts that go beyond countries. I have been working with this species in southern South America since I was an undergraduate student, and my work has focused mainly on Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, countries in which, due to their southernmost position, shorebirds that faced the longest migrations are concentrated. And I knew that I wanted to be part of the Coastal Solution Program since its launch. In South America, we are behind in adopting transdisciplinary and cross-sectoral approach. And I knew that being part of this program was going to give me the tools and conditions I needed to be more effective in my conservation actions. The project that I'm leading for the program is based on Chiloé Island in southern Chile, where approximately the 99% of Alaska's Hudsonia godwit population is concentrated during the non-breeding season. And one of the main threats in this area is seaweed farming, particularly of a seaweed that is used to obtain agar, a raw material for food and pharmaceutical industries. The production of this seaweed coincides spatially and temporally with the daily feeding needs of shorebirds, and therefore we are faced to a challenge, but also to an opportunity to find solutions to balance economic and conservation interests. My goal is to improve habitat conditions for shorebirds through best practice of seaweed farming. And for this, we have assembled a transdisciplinary team composed by biologists, sociologists and anthropologists, and engineers that are working with key actors of local communities to achieve a balance between improving habitat conditions for shorebirds and economic sustenance for local communities. We have identified bad practices from an ecological point of view, but we have also conducted interviews to learn what seaweed farmers perceive as bad practices. The important thing about knowing what users themselves perceive as a bad practice is that give us an idea of what behaviors could be more easily modified. We are currently in the process of reaching agreements for the implementation of this best practice with seaweed farmers, and these practices will tend to reduce and hopefully to eliminate the presence of companion dogs in seaweed farms, to progressively reduce the use of ox cart, to reduce and remove the plastic waste generated by the activity, and finally to rotate people within the farms to always keep some sectors of shorebird feeding areas free from anthropogenic disturbances. We have identified some cultural and economic incentives for shorebird protection. On the one hand, local people valued birds as a fundamental part of their cultural and natural heritage. As an example, these communities hold the migratory bird festivals every year. And among the economic incentives, most of the farmers stated that they want to diversify their incomes, incorporating ecotourism activities. So this shows us that there is a good possibility of reaching agreements to change behaviors in favor of shorebirds. However, in the next steps of the project, we will start working with economists to incorporate market-based conservation tools that allow us to increase the incentive to achieve the desired behavioral changes. And in this way, the program is giving me the opportunity to learn and apply tools from different disciplines to achieve conservation goals. But it also allows me to improve my skills as biology scientist. It not only gives me the support of the excellent professionals at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, but it also opens doors for me to collaborate with shorebird specialists from other institutions with whom I have been collaborating in the course of my project. So my participation in this program is allowing me to think about conservation from another point of view, and it is supporting me to develop priority actions on the Pacific American Flyway. But at the same time, I think that through the interaction with program partners, the program has allowed me to expand my ability to work for shorebird conservation beyond the limits of my project, or even beyond the limits of the Pacific American Flyway. For example, my host institution It's part of the core group that is developing the conservation plan of the birds of Chile, which will be an excellent opportunity to put the conservation needs of shorebirds on the government's agenda. And in addition, in the last year, I was invited by some program partners to be part of the steering committees of the Mid-Continent Flyway Initiative and the Conservation Plan of Shorebirds of Argentina. And as I have already told you, shorebirds need coordinated efforts among several countries and flyways. And I think that our link with program partners is a terrific opportunity to accomplish this. And in conclusion, and already closing, this program is undoubtedly changing my way of thinking and working in conservation by leaving behind the approach that only addressed shorebirds' needs to adopt an approach that balances the needs of birds with the needs of local communities. And I believe that this program changed the way by which fellows tackle conservation issues, but it also has the potential to change the way of thinking about conservation of many people with whom the fellows are working in different countries. And as I said at the beginning, for me, the most beautiful thing about this program is that it allows me to be part of a growing flock that crosses borders. Thank you very much. And I'm going to invite Carol to come back and handle questions.
Great. Thanks, Natalia, so much for sharing your experience with us. At this time, we welcome you all to submit your questions via the feature at the bottom of the screen. Several of you have been doing so already, and so I'm going to invite the panelists to turn their videos back on if they wish, and I will share some of these questions with you. The first one that's come in is really directed for Brian and is about Ebird. And one of the questions that someone asked is, how does Ebird account for errors made by birders if they accidentally misidentify a bird? And what if people double count birds by accident?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's a really important one. We, for a number of years, have really invested a lot in the data quality aspects of Ebird. Just to give you a sense, when Ebird first started back in 2002, data quality was very, very basic. So what we use is a matrix of probability of occurrence regionally to determine what's rare and what needs to be looked at by a team of reviewers. So when a birder's in the field using the Ebird mobile app, they'll get flagged immediately if they try to report a bird that's uncommon or unusual, either the location or even for the date. And if they go through with that report and report that bird to Ebird, it stays in a holding tank where our team of Ebird regional reviewers actually looks at those records, works with the observer to check through the documentation, photos, audio, video, details, those kinds of things. Basically, this team of now, I think it's approaching 3,000 people globally vetting Ebird data every day. They're working with our Ebird observers to make sure that these records are as high quality as can be. And I'm not going to pretend that there's not some misidentified birds in there. There are, but when you're dealing with scale like we have with Ebird, the signal starts to outweigh the noise, and we have an ever-evolving and increasingly intricate data quality process behind Ebird that's basically unlike anything that's ever been attempted in citizen science before. So it's really important.
Great. We have a follow-up question also about Ebird, and I think it's particularly interesting. So someone mentioned that they're really they don't view themselves as a competitive birder, and they're wondering what the benefit can be to the lab for its research for submitting a checklist anyway. Is there still a benefit to the lab to input an individual list?
Absolutely. Yeah, when we think of Ebird as a tool for anyone that's interested in birds, you don't need to be an expert birder who travels all over the world looking at birds. Many people just bird locally in their yards or in their neighborhoods. And really, Ebird is interested in all observations of all birds. And the best thing you could do is submit a checklist from your yard every day. And people might think, well, why would I want to do that? I'm just reporting the same birds over and over again. But Ebird is set up to record birds over time so that we can measure change over time. And when you imagine a patchwork of 1 million backyards of the planet where everybody's observing birds every day, we can get a really good sense of what's going on with bird populations. So it's really critical to get the message across to this group that you don't have to be an expert to use Ebird. Download the Merlin app to help you with your bird IDs and get your data into Ebird. And I think you'll see by using it why it's important to do that every day. And it's pretty rewarding to see your data become part of that database too.
Great, thanks, Brian. I also have a question here really for Osval, and just hoping, we realize the future is uncertain, but hoping that you can describe a little bit about your long-term vision for the Coastal Solutions Program. And I know you described the funding already. Somebody asked, will the project extend beyond these initial few years? What is your hope?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. No, so the fellowship is for 2 years, but really the hope is that all of the fellows, when they become senior fellows, they remain as part of the Coastal Solutions Network and keep participating in conservation projects along the Pacific Flyway. One of the key elements in part of the training with the fellows is fundraising, and the capacity to develop their project into long-term initiatives. So that's one of the key elements. We want these projects to be not just like a parachute effort, but really something that flourishes and that have long-term impact, but also becomes something larger, so conservation at the larger scale because of the replication. So those are two big elements, and then also the involvement of not just the fellows, but their teams in this network. So we see this as part of the replication process. And right now we have a vision for the next 5 to 7 years, but we really hope that this becomes a model that shows how successful conservation could be incubated, to make it faster in terms of capacity building. And it's something that becomes successful in the Pacific Flyway, and then that we can replicate it in other flyways in the Americas, but then elsewhere also.
Fantastic. Another question for Osval and Natalia. Someone has a question here, hoping that you can describe any efforts to involve children in conservation in Latin America, whether specifically in your project, Natalia, or of other efforts that both of you may be aware of in different countries.
Do you want to talk about your project, Natalia, and then I can talk about some of the other fellows, what they're doing?
Yeah, of course. I think that working with children is really important to motivate adults to change their behaviors. So we are working with local schools now in Chile, and I'm also working in other sites outside my project. I really like to work with children, doing bird watching with them, giving talks with them. It's a long-term process, and you don't see the results now. You will see the results in maybe 10 or 20 years, but I think it's really, really important. And there are a lot of coordinated efforts along the different flyways to involve schools. There was a program called Sisters Schools of America that in which children share their experience and draws and videos, and it's really interesting to make that the children feel that they are also connected just as shorebirds. So that's my experience working with children.
Yeah, and that's been something really exciting about the different projects. Most of the projects, they don't have a main emphasis on environmental education, but all of them always include that. And it's exciting that it's not only the outreach, or the education, but the engagement, the next step in which you really involve different sectors. And we're trying to promote this in a very strategic way that, you make sure that you engage decision makers, because you need to have a conservation impact now. But don't forget about the next generation, because that's the long lasting impact. So yeah, a lot of the fellows are doing what Natalia is describing, involving schools and doing bird walks and telling about the connections and how birds in Chile are coming from Alaska and Canada. And I think that's very exciting for people. And now with all of these tools that we have, like through Ebird and the videos and the radio transmitters showing the locations, I think it gets people excited about these connections.
Great, thank you. As an aside, the lab also has a very extensive program called Celebrate Urban Birds that really focuses on engaging young children from around the world in conservation. So it's another initiative at the lab to check out. A question here for Brian about Ebird, and are there any concerns about reporting species that are threatened to Ebird?
Yes, there are. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's complicated because there is sensitivity based on the conservation status of a species. There's also sensitivities around bad behavior of bird watchers or photographers around certain species and things like that. So we do work with partner groups around the world to limit the ability for people to see specific locations of a set of taxa, for example, in California. We don't show you exactly where points fall, where birds are reported for a subset of species. And we even go as so far to limit that seasonally. If a bird is, just sensitive during its breeding season, but maybe not during the rest of the year. So we do have a back-end database structure that's implemented globally to make sure that birds, eBird isn't used in those ways where we know it could be. And the real area of concern is Southeast Asia, where the caged bird trade is really pervasive, and some of these birds are really, really threatened. And we know people are trying to use eBird to find the locations for these species. So yeah, we take it seriously again, and it's an evolving process. So it's a global effort.
Thanks, Brian. A number of people have asked the same question in different ways, so I'll pose it to the panelists. I'm happy to jump in with some thoughts myself, but a number of our guests tonight are asking, how can I help birds from where I am? What can I do locally to contribute to bird conservation? Like I said, I'm happy to jump in, but if others want to mention some thoughts first.
I can go first. I'm sure all of us have been thinking all about these things. Well, Brian mentioned that help with Ebird. Ebird data is extremely helpful for conservation planning, and I think, right, Brian, you have the saying, like every bird counts. And so, yeah, so it helps. And it not only for the current abundance and distribution, but the trends. Now we're getting an understanding of trends and relating that to land use changes. So it really helps in decision-making for conservation. And there are a lot of different things, and the lab has been involved, for example, in sustainable coffee, things about your choices. If you can, in your breakfast, if you can select a coffee that is bird friendly, then you're helping, and there are a number of decisions like those, that everyday little things that help with birds. In California, it's certainly water, if you can be very conscious about your water, and then certainly birds need those. So those are a few examples. I'm sure Brian, Natalia, and Caroline, you might have other things to add.
Well, those are great, Oswald. Thank you. I just thinking out loud here, and one of the things you can do right in your backyard is to plant native plants, which will attract birds and other native insects to your yard. Even one plant makes a difference to do something in your backyard. There are other land use practices that you can avoid, like avoid using pesticides, since birds are really sensitive to those. Another option right at your home is to make windows safer for birds. So there are special decals that you could put on your windows so that birds can see them to avoid collisions with windows. Keeping cats indoors is really a great choice as well to avoid bird deaths. And another one is trying to minimize plastic use in this modern world. All of us can also do our part to try to conserve habitat for birds and to help further research. So supporting a conservation organization that champions that mission is another way you can help. If others have other thoughts, feel free to jump in, or the questions keep on rolling here and I can pose the next one. I will go ahead in the interest of trying to get to as many questions as possible, and we welcome your questions after the event. You can feel free to contact me directly should we not get to all of them today. My contact information will be provided in a follow-up email. But here's another one about the Coastal Solutions Program. So someone says, so glad to hear about the Coastal Solutions Program. How many years of foundation support do you have? I hope it continue for many years. I hope it can continue for many years. Is there a link to federal or local governments in Latin American countries?
Yeah, so about that with the foundation, so we did a plan for 6 years, which is, it's wonderful actually. Typically with foundations, you do like 1 year or 2 years, but yeah, we were able to found like a joint vision and develop a plan for 6 years. It doesn't mean that it will end at the same 6 years. It doesn't mean either that it will continue, right? But at least we have 6 years in terms of a vision jointly with the Packard Foundation. Of course, we want this to continue for many, many decades, no? But at least we have this plan, no? And yeah, so all of each of those sites, no, where we have fellows, one of the key elements that we ask them to do is to have these connections with the institutional framework for the implementation. That's something that they need to develop. And Natalia can tell you, as a biologist, it's not always easy, but they need to. Now that's part of the training, to find the institutional mechanisms to make these long-term successes. So they work with local and state and federal agencies to make this happen. So each of them is developing those connections.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. I was amiss in forgetting one other key point about how you can help conserve habitat for birds is, considering your voting for policies or for candidates that support causes that are consistent with yours and for birds. Somebody asked, how soon does migration begin in the fall on the West Coast? When should they be looking out for birds that breed in the Arctic and aren't necessarily in their areas year round?
I can jump in and take that one. Ebird's a great tool for that. If you go to those bar charts that I showed for any reason, show you exactly when those Arctic shorebirds arrive in your area. Here in Central California, they start to arrive the last week of June, and the peak shorebird migration is basically now through California for the next several weeks. And then in September, the juveniles will come through, and they tend to trail the adults by several weeks to a month. So you've got another 6 weeks or so of good shorebird migration through California or the Pacific coast, and then everything's down south or on its wintering grounds. Then in terms of land birds, warblers and things like that breed in the boreal forest or the western forests, those are also starting to move already, but their peak tends to be more September to early October in this region. And then waterfowl and seabirds are basically the last migrants to come in, and they tend to be late October and November. So, birds are amazing. The latest northward bound migrants are passing the earliest southbound migrants in California in late June. So there are always some birds on the move. It's pretty amazing.
Thanks, Brian. This question specifically for Natalia, but also Natalia, you may have heard from some of your other colleagues in the fellowship program, but Somebody is asking if your project has been affected by the pandemic, and if you could share a little bit about your experience with that.
Yes, of course, it has been affected. We work a lot with local communities, and we have lockdowns and we cannot conduct meetings, so we have to reschedule our plans. So we are thinking in expanding our skill to obtain our goals, to reach our goals in the near future. But of course, I have to reschedule that. It's challenging, but it's the new reality.
Another question here coming in about Ebird. So someone's wondering, like, what does the lab do with Ebird data after people submit it, in addition to submitting checklists and being able to see birds? Like, what does the lab do with that after it arrives?
So there's a lot of different use cases for Ebird data. The lab really considers itself the steward of this massive database. The database is completely open to the public, so the lab's job is to take in the data, vet the data, make sure that we're creating data products based on the most scientifically defensible observation data that come into the database, and then we put those data products out for public consumption. Some of the public consumption of that is via Ebird for the birding community, but we also have a suite of public-facing outputs for science, conservation, education, all these different use cases, and the data are packaged in different ways for those different groups. If you're a data modeler, for example, you might want the raw Ebird data in its sort of complete richness. And you can pull that down if your computer can handle multiple gigabytes of data coming across. Or you might be a conservation practitioner who only wants a small subset of data for the land that you manage. And you could pull down those data, or look at the modeled data products, the science products that Ebird puts out. As I showed you, the abundance map for the long-billed curlew that was moving across the landscape, that map is underpinned by predicted occurrences of long-billed curlew at 3-kilometer resolution. So across the entire Western Hemisphere, we're making predictions every 3 kilometers, every week of the year for that species. So you can imagine having a predicted surface that's that precise and accurate is highly interesting to conservationists hoping to implement these data in a bunch of different ways. So there are a few papers out there we've published on Ebird data use. The most recent one was Biological Conservation, I think 2017, where we looked at a bunch of different ways and categorized data use. I'd point you to that for sort of a deeper dive into it. But it's pretty rewarding to see all the different ways Ebird data are being used, and they're being used in ways we never thought possible. So it's pretty exciting.
Thanks, Brian. There's so many other excellent questions rolling in, but I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to have to hold on additional questions for now. But thank you for your excellent questions and for your interest in birds. I hope today's presentation has offered you some inspiration. It certainly has for me. You'll be receiving a survey about tomorrow, and we welcome any feedback that you have about this presentation. And you'll be receiving some resources that give you direct access to a lot of the tools that were mentioned today, and to learn more about the Coastal Solutions Fellowship Program here at the lab. If you're interested in learning more about the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, birds, or any of the initiatives discussed tonight, please contact me, or you can explore the lab online at birds.cornell.edu. My contact information will be included in a follow-up note with other materials to enrich your birdwatching experience. And please join us in our efforts to study, appreciate, and protect birds. We would be humbled if you'd consider joining our community of lab members if you have not done so already. Thank you again to all of you for being with us, and to West Coast Alumni Affairs for co-hosting this event. Until next time, happy birding and be well.